What would you say is the weakest part of your thesis? This is a challenging and tricky question for many students during a thesis defense, because what should you say in answer to this question? Should you defend yourself? Should you confess everything? Or should you pretend that there are no weaknesses in your thesis? Here's the ironic part. This question is actually one of the easier ones to answer well, if you understand what the examiners are looking for. In this video, I will show you why this question is not a trap, I will share with you the 3 common mistakes that students make, and I will give you a simple but effective approach that you can use to turn this tricky question into a very strong answer. Let's get into it. First, what are examiners looking for with this question? Why do they ask this question? Examiners already know that your thesis has weaknesses. Every thesis has weaknesses. Even articles published in top-tier research journals have weaknesses and limitations, and those are written by people who have been doing research before even you were born. So your thesis having weaknesses and limitations is no breaking news. Examiners are not asking this question because they suddenly discovered something terribly wrong with your thesis. They're asking this question because they want to see whether you understand your own thesis like a researcher does. This question tests 3 pretty important things. Can you evaluate your own work critically? That's the critical thinking part, which is very important in graduation thesis and projects. Another thing that this question tests is, do you understand the methodological trade-offs you worked with? This tests your research methodological knowledge and competence. And lastly, can you stay calm when challenged? This tests that all-important, competent researcher attitude. That's it. This question is not a trap. It's a question meant to test a few very important things. Now, second, let's talk about a few bad reactions that students sometimes give and why they're bad. The first bad reaction is saying something like, quote, "Honestly, I don't think my study has any real weaknesses." That was an actual response that we once got from a student during a thesis defense. What do you think happened then? You know, his thesis was actually fine, but it was nowhere near being perfect. So the examiners wanted to make him see that his work did have some weaknesses. Because the moment that the student said that his thesis had no weaknesses, the atmosphere in the room changed. The examiners realized that this was a student who actually did not understand how research worked. So for the next 15 minutes or so, almost every follow-up question from the panel centered on methodological and analytical limitations. So to claim that his thesis had no weaknesses, that was not a great response. Second bad reaction, total panic and overconfession. Some students go the opposite direction and basically dismantle and devalue their entire thesis themselves. They'd start listing everything that might possibly be considered potentially imperfect. This would make examiners go, "Oh, that's interesting. I wasn't worried before, but now I am." Remember, you're just answering one question, so give one answer. No need to completely self-destruct your own thesis. The third bad reaction, they give a fake, cliché, safe answer. They'd say something like, "Oh well, if I had more time and more participants, that would have been better for my data collection." That's technically true, but that's also technically true for every thesis, which makes it rather meaningless. It's a universal answer. It's not wrong, but it's also not quite right, because it sounds like a standardized answer copied from a YouTube video or a template somewhere. Not great. So, point number 3. Let's talk about what actually works. The correct approach has 3 simple considerations. First, you would want to name a weakness or a limitation that's genuine and relevant to your thesis. Hopefully, not something that is so universal and cliché that it's applicable to all theses. You want to mention something that's truly relevant to your work. Second, you want to show that whatever this weakness or limitation is, it is not so serious that it invalidates your work. You want to show, despite this limitation, my key findings and conclusions still hold. Third, you want to show that this weakness or limitation was understood during the research process. It was not some mistake that you accidentally discovered after the whole thesis was finished. I understood that my research methodological approach would have this or that limitation, but given the focus of my research and given the constraints that I had to work with, I still chose this research methodological approach while acknowledging and accepting this weakness. So these 3 considerations, if you could manage them, would be very useful. Let me give you an example. Examiners ask, what would you say is the biggest weakness in your research? My answer would be something like this. Well, I would say a major weakness is that my sample was employees from one single organization, the company where I did my internship. This means potential limitations in generalizability, that my findings and conclusions should not be automatically generalized to other companies or sectors. I do want to add that this was something that I was aware of from the start. The goal of my research was to analyze this organization in depth rather than to produce broad statistical generalizations. And with that scope in mind, I would argue that despite this weakness, my key findings and conclusions are still meaningful and relevant for this company and similar organizational contexts. There, that's already a strong and safe answer, incorporating those key considerations. Now, if you want to sound especially strong and smart, you could add something like, and if I were to extend this research or design a follow-up study, what I would improve is expanding the sample to include employees from more organizations in this industry, so that the findings from different companies could be compared and contrasted. This would enable us to see whether the same patterns would hold beyond this one company and to better establish generalizability. If we look at this example answer overall, it presents a weakness that is real and specific to my qualitative interview-based research. The reasoning is clear, I argue why my findings and conclusions still make sense, and I touch on implications for future research. There is no apology for this methodological limitation or weakness, as there is no need to, because no research is perfect. Every study has weaknesses and limitations. Actually, you see, that's one of the biggest psychological mistakes that many students make about thesis defense. They think the goal is to prove that their thesis is perfect. It isn't. The goal is to prove that you understand how research works and that limitations are part of research. Ironically, a student who calmly explains their weaknesses often come across much stronger than a student who pretends that their research is flawless. If your thesis defense is coming up soon, you are probably already thinking about which question would worry you the most. So I'm curious, what's the one defense question you are most nervous about right now? Write it in the comments. I read all viewer comments because they help me decide what videos to make next. So I invite you to leave your thoughts and comments down below. Check out my other videos on thesis defense and academic evaluation. I am sure you will find them interesting and useful. Thanks for watching this Ranywayz random video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.